Good morning, this is your Master Sensei, Mr. Spensei, and this is the STAAR on domain and range problems 15 through 26. So the population of Center City is modeled by the exponential function f, where x is the number of years after the year 2015. The graph f is shown on the grid. We haven't even talked about exponential functions, but that's okay. Which inequality best represents the range? All right, there's our key word. We care about range. We also know inequality, and if it's the range, we're talking about the y values. So that means we have to draw to the y-axis. So when I draw to the y-axis right here, I come up with somewhere about 250,000. So I'm going to say approximately 250,000. I really don't know that yet, but 250,000. And that's a solid, so this is going to be a less than or equal to because it's a solid line, so it acts like a dot, less than or equal to y, and we have an arrow. Well, this arrow is continuing up to positive infinity, so less than positive infinity. Anytime we have infinity, that means all real numbers, but we're not allowed to include that in our answer. So y is greater than or equal to 250,000. And we're looking for an answer choice that looks like this. This one says X, obviously can't be X. This says X, can't be that because we're working with a range. So we're down to these two. So this says 250,000 to a million. Well, we have an arrow, and arrow means infinity. So this is wrong. So the only one it can be is that, and that's actually what matches what we already have. So the answer to 15 is B. All right, number 16. What is the domain of f of x equals 9 minus x squared? Well, we don't even know what that shape is unless we've already studied quadratics, which we haven't in this class. So the best thing we can do is go to Desmos and take a look and go, what does this even look like, and see if we can figure this out from a graph. So we're going to go ahead and share over to that. And hopefully we're looking at Desmos. I'm going to clear this stuff out that I already have there, and I'm going to plug in that equation. Now it said f of x, which is the same as saying y. So y equals 9 minus x. And using the little, going down here and pressing the squared, I have that equation. So f of x I replace with y, and I get this. Okay, so what I notice is it asks for the domain. All right. And domain is the x values. Well, what is happening with the x values? They keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're going from negative infinity to positive infinity. So having seen that, let's go to our graph. Let's look at this real quickly. So remember, f of x is y. So this is why I plugged in y equals 9 minus x squared. And when we looked at the graph, we had the graph that looked something like this. And so it was going negative infinity, less than x, because it asked for domain, and domain is the x values, less than x, less than positive infinity. So negative infinity to positive infinity, we're not allowed to do that. So we have to write all real numbers. All right. So the answer choice for all real numbers is G. Okay. All right. Moving on. Number 17. It says, number 17, the graph of part of a linear function g is shown on the grid. Which inequality best represents the domain of this part of the graph? Well, domain is my x values. All right, so domain is my x value, so we have to draw to the x-axis. So when I look and domain is working because the x-axis is left to right, so we have to go left to right. So I'm going to draw to the x-axis, and I get negative 9. And this is a hollow, which means this is a less than x. And then I have to draw to the x-axis again, furthest to the right, which is 2. And it's a solid, and solids have the line underneath. So negative 9 less than x, less than or equal to 2. Well, first off, we can get rid of this because these actually mean y. So those are the y's, so those are wrong. So now we're looking at this. Well, the hollow is the one without the line, so our best answer choice to 17 is F. Moving on to number 18. Which graph best represents a function with a range? So we're looking for range, so that means our y. This says are all real numbers, okay, greater than or equal to. So this says greater than or equal to, so that means I have to have a solid line. So I either need a solid line or a solid dot because it's greater than or equal to, and it has to be larger than -6. Now remember, range is drawn to the y-axis, and we always go from bottom or least to greatest, bottom to top, drawing to the y-axis. Well, the problem with this -6 is it's drawn to the x-axis, all right? And we have to draw the ranges to the y-axis, so this is wrong. When I look at this one, it's drawn to the y-axis, and all the points are above it, so this is looking pretty good. I'm liking this answer a lot. I'm liking C. When I go to B, B is drawn to the y-axis, but instead of being greater than, it's below, it's less than, so this can't be it. And then when I go to this one, it's drawn to the x-axis, and we know being drawn to the x-axis is wrong. Our best answer choice to number 18 is C. All right, question 19. Y equals -x² minus 2x plus 3, and it's asking for what is the range. So it's asking for the y values. Well, unfortunately, I don't even know what this looks like. If I don't know what it looks like, I should go to Desmos. And please remember, if it's range, we're looking for them bottom to top. So I'm going to switch over to Desmos. And I have no y equals -x² minus 2x plus 3. And look, I have a graph that's turning down. Well, what is my highest point on the graph? My highest point of the graph for the y, and we only care about the y, is 4. Oh, all right, because it asks for the range. And it's a solid line, so it's going to be a less than or equal to 4. That's the highest point on the graph. And the lowest point, gosh, it keeps going. It keeps going to -infinity. So the bottom is at -infinity. And I'm not even sharing. I'm sorry about that. Here's the share. So I typed it in y equals -x² plus 3, -x² minus 2x plus 3. And when I go to this point, that being the highest point on the graph, it's like, oh, the y value, because my x is -1, my y value at +4 is my highest if I was drawing a line across. Okay, so my highest point is at 4. And looking at it, if I scroll down, it just keeps going and going and going to -infinity. All right, so let's go ahead and stop that. So what I end up with is -infinity is less than y is less than or equal to +4. Well, we know we can't have this, so we need to have y is greater than -4. Immediately we can get rid of this because it asks for the range, so it gets rid of our x values. So we need y is less than 4. The one that has less than 4 is C. All right, moving on to number 20. Says, what are the domain and range of f of x equals -37? All right, this is crazy. Okay, so once again, this is probably one that we need to graph. And they're asking for the domain and range. Well, first off, remember f of x equals -37. And maybe you forgot what that looks like, but f of x just means y. So y equals -37. And in the event that you forgot what that looked like, let's go ahead and go back to Desmos and take a look at it. And hopefully this time I'll switch over when I'm supposed to. So hopefully we're looking at Desmos, and I'm going to change this to y equals negative 37. And I did that, and I don't see my graph. So that means I need to zoom out. Oh, look, I have a horizontal line. And wherever I point my, whenever I put my marker on the graph, my y value doesn't change. So my y value is negative 37, and my x value looks like it goes all the way to positive infinity and all the way to negative infinity. So I'm going to stop my share. And so my y value equals negative 37. So the range, remember the range is your y value, the range is going to be negative 37. All right, so we know what our range is. The range is negative 37. That looks pretty good. In the domain, we said the x values were negative infinity, less than x, all the way to positive infinity. And we can't write that. We write all real numbers. So our answer to number 20 appears to be domain is all real numbers because that's our x's. Remember, domain is the x, range is the y, and our range is just the single value of negative 37. All right. Number 21. What appears to be the domain of the part of exponential function graphed on the grid? All right, so we're looking for the domain is our key word. So domain is our x values. And in this case, that means we're going to be drawing from to our x-axis. And remember, it's left to right. And the reason it's always left to right is because the x-axis goes left to right. So drawing to the x-axis, beginning at the left, we go to -1. -1, and this is a solid, and the solid gets that symbol, so less than or equal to x. And then we go as far as we can to the right, and that's +3. It's also a solid. So -1 less than or equal to x, less than or equal to 3. Because they asked for domain, we can immediately get rid of the ones that have the y's, and the one that has the correct answer is A. So 21 is A. Moving on to 22. Which of these best represents the domain of F? Well, this arrow, and by the way, we're looking for domain. So domain is the x's. And please remember, domain goes like the x-axis, left to right. So this is going all the way to, this arrow is getting wider and wider and wider. So it's technically going to go to negative infinity, less than x. And this is going to get wider and wider to the right. So it's going to positive infinity. So the best choice for this is all real numbers. So my answer choice for this is G. Number 23. The daily cost of hiring a plumber, Y, to work X hours on a repair project can be modeled using a linear function. The plumber charges a fixed cost of $80 plus an additional cost of $45 per hour. So fixed costs, additional cost of $45 per hour. And they also said that this is a linear function. Next thing is a maximum of 8 hours. Okay, so let's think about this. Could he work 1.2 hours? 0.3 hours? Yes. So this is going to be a continuous. And because it's continuous, we're going to have to use inequality. So, all of these have inequalities. And it says, what is the range of the function of this situation? So first off, we need to write an equation. Well, linear, so we think y equals mx plus b. Well, fixed cost of $80. The word per means I have to multiply. So this is going to be 45x or 45h for hours. So y equals 45x plus 80. Well, what's the minimum he could work or the maximum he could work? The max he could work is 8 hours. So we could go y equals 45 parenthesis 8 plus 80. And just using the calculator, calculate that out. 45 parenthesis 8 plus 80 is 440. So x has to be, we're looking for our y value. Our x is 8. So y has to be less than or equal to 440. But what happens if he works 0 hours? That could be probably the minimum he could work. In this case, if it was the minimum, we'd go y equals 45 parenthesis 0 plus 80. When I plug that into the calculator, 45 parenthesis 0 plus 80, I end up getting 80. All right. Now, they did not ask for the domain, but had they asked for the domain, remember that would be my input. The maximum hours is 8. The minimum hours is 0. So this would be my domain, and this would be my range. So since they asked for the range, they asked for the y, we can get rid of these x's. And the one that has 80 to 440 is B, so the best answer choice to 23 is B. 24. A student worked out at a gym continuously for 50 minutes. The graph shows the remaining percentage workout as a linear function um, of X time in minutes. Which answer choice best describes the domain? So remember, domain is our X's and the range, the Y. All right, so we have domain and range again. Notice they made this the X-axis and this is the Y-axis. So when I look at this, if I'm doing my domain, I have to draw to the X-axis. Well, drawing to the X-axis, that would be at 50 and 0. So my domain, because remember, domain goes, I'm going to write this over here, domain, it's the X, but it's left to right because left to right is the direction of the X-axis. So in this case, it went from 0 all the way to 50. 0 less than or equal to X less than or equal to 50. And I used the line underneath it because I had solid endpoints. All right. Now we need to worry about the range. Well, the range is always being drawn to the y-axis. And the range is to the y, and it's bottom to top. So my lowest value is my 0, because drawing to the y-axis, and my highest value is 100. Put a y in the middle to remind myself. And it gets a line underneath because once again, I have solid endpoints. So domain, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 100. No, the domain is 0 to 50. Domain is an individual value. No, it's a range of values. This would be an individual value. This would mean that our value is specifically 1 point. It would be -2, 100, where this is my X, this is my Y. That's wrong. So domain, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 50. That looks good. Range, all real numbers greater than or equal to 0, less than or equal to 100. That looks good. Best answer choice there is C. All right, moving on to number 25. As a part of an exponential function is graphed on the grid, which inequality best represents the domain for the part shown? Well, domain is the x values. All right. So that means I have to go left to right because the x-axis is left to right, and we also draw to the x-axis. So drawing to the x-axis, we have -2. That's my furthest to the left. It's a solid dot, so it gets a less than or equal to. Then I have an arrow, and this arrow is continually going off into positive infinity, so less than positive infinity. You can't have that, so that gets crossed out. So we need to flip it, and we have x is greater than or equal to -2. Best answer choice is A. All right, this last one. What are the domain and range of g of x equals this crazy equation? All right, remember domain is the x, range is the y, and domain is left to right, and range is bottom to top. As a reminder, g of x is just another way of saying y, so y equals -1/4 x minus 17 squared plus 61. And you're like, how am I going to figure that out? Well, I think it'd be best to have a graph. So with that said, let's switch over to Desmos. And I'm going to type that in. So y equals -1/4 parenthesis use a little square down here plus 61. Make sure you have it in there correctly. I do, and turns out mine fit on the screen. If not, you may have to zoom in and zoom out. So in the x direction, it looks like it's getting wider and wider and wider in both directions. So if it's getting wider and wider in both directions, that means the x direction is, or the domain, or the x's, is -infinity less than x less than positive infinity. And the range, or the y, well, it looks like it starts at -infinity because it keeps going down. When I scroll, or try to scroll, excuse me, when I try to scroll, it just keeps going down and down. So that means it looks like it starts negative, it goes to -infinity, which is less than y, and then it stops at the highest point that it goes to appears to be 61. And it's a solid line, so that's going to be a less than or equal to 61. And you know what? I did not share, so let me back off of that and redo all that conversation. So first off, when I look at this graph, and by the way, I typed it all in. When I looked at this graph, it gets wider and wider and wider in the x direction. It goes to -infinity, then to positive infinity in the x direction because it's getting wider and wider. So my domain is -infinity to positive infinity. And the range, well, it looks like it starts off at -infinity and goes all the way up. And if I click on the highest point, it's like, oh, the highest point is at 61. So if I stop this share, I end up with a domain of -infinity less than or equal to x less than infinity, which we don't say, we say all reals. And here we have -infinity less than y less than or equal to 61, but we drop this part off and we have y is less than or equal to 61, and that's my range. So please remember, y is the same thing in this case as saying g of x. So domain, all real numbers. I like that. Domain, all real numbers. So now we're down to two answer choices because we know the domain is all real numbers. We have g of x is less than 61 or y is less than 61. This looks real good. Let's check this one. It says, oh, 17. That 17 happened to be our x value, so that's not correct because that was an x and we need a y. So g of x stands for y, but that x is not correct. Our best answer choice is 26 is F. All right, appreciate you watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.